So now we have our third panel of the day, and this is the chance to hear about business perspectives. The UNDP works with leading global businesses, and this now is the chance to hear from them. Our moderator, I'd like to introduce him first of all. Mr. Marcos Athias Neto, and he is the director of the UNDP Istanbul Private Sector Center. Welcome. Thank you. And next, if you could come closer, so it's not too far for you all, we have Aylin Somersan, Coqui, who is the CEO of Allianz Turkey. Welcome, thank you. Please take a seat. And next, we have Goossens, the Executive Vice President for Turkey, Central Asia and Iran from Unilever. Merhaba. Selim Kervanci is the CEO of HSBC Turkey. Hello. And finally, Berna Ulman is the Executive Director for Southeast Europe from Visa. Thank you very much. Welcome. And just a quick note, please do tweet in your questions. We do have questions that I haven't read out because of time restraints. The hashtag is there, IDD2018. And one note to the audience, please make questions, not statements. Keep it brief because time is really of the essence and we really want to hear from our panelists. So keep your questions, not statements. I hand you over to the world of business. See you in a bit.
Thank you very much, Maria. Good morning. We know that we are standing between you and food, but I think it's worth it. It's not every day we have 4 CEOs of 4 top Fortune 500 companies together. My name is Marcos Neto. I'm the director of the Istanbul International Center for Private Sector Development, which is a partnership between UNDP and the Turkish government, which we are very grateful for that partnership. And we are based in Istanbul and we serve the whole of UNDP's work on making sure that the private sector fully contributes to Agenda 2030 and to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Why does it matter to UNDP and why does it matter to the United Nations that the private sector is engaged? It is very simple. There cannot be successful implementation for the SDGs without the private sector. It's impossible. The price tag is very large. You know, our colleagues at UNCTAD have calculated the agenda cost is anywhere between $5 and $7 trillion a year, every year, for 15 years. They also calculated that might be a shortfall of anywhere between $1.9 and $3.1 trillion. We know that while public finance and development cooperation are important sources of resources, it is not enough. It doesn't mean that we expected you to simply donate $3.1 trillion because we know that that's not going to happen, right? But beyond money, the private sector is essential in terms of innovation. You know, it's a part of the economy that innovates the most. In terms of job, 90% of all jobs in the world are in the hand of the private sector. 60% of all hard currency is in the hand of the private sector. And 80% of GDP is in the hand of the private sector. So those numbers are enough to tell you that that cannot be the SDGs without the private sector. Personally, what I like the most about the partnership with the private sector and the need for the private sector is a scale. You know, we all have those little things in our hands, right? 10 years ago, the first iPhone was put together. There's more phones than people in the world now. The capacity to scale a solution, to scale things up, is unmatched by the private sector, which is the only one that has that capacity. Now, that is why we, the United Nations, need you. What is in it for you? So why should you care about the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I have somewhere here is a good friend of mine who used to work on the Business Sustainable Development Commission. And they put a report there, which was a commission which was co-chaired by Paul Polman, the CEO of Unilever. And they calculated there are $12 trillion of economic opportunity inside the SDGs every year for 15 years. So that number should already let you know that the problem of the SDGs is not lack of money. You know, if it costs 5 to 7, there are 12 trillion of new business to be unlocked inside the SDG, business for you. That is one reason why you should care. There's a business opportunity in it. Beyond the bottom line, we know that by 2025, 75% of the labor force will be millennial. We know the millennials care about purpose. We know the millennials don't want to work just for a paycheck. They want to know, you know, that they are working for a company or working somewhere that is changing the world. The SDGs also open the doors for new innovation. And finally, the SDGs tended to reach out to the so-called base of the pyramid, which is half of the world's population, which represents a consumer market of $5 trillion. So contrary to the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, which was a classic social agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals speak to business core agenda. And I think that is the transformation aspect and the good match. So if we need the business, we at least design an agenda as governments and UN that appeal to business core interests. And what you're going to hear today is exactly that, is 4 companies that are adapting to some degree business models. Because the important point it is, the opportunity that the SDGs present itself can't be reached with business as usual. So there has to be a change on business models to become more inclusive, more sustainable, to unlock that $12 trillion. And governments have a role to play in providing the proper set of enabling environment and policies that show to the marketplace the type of business models that governments want to see gaining scale. That's all that you're going to hear from me as a framing. And now I think the most important aspect is to hear from our panelists. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to pose the same question to the 4, and they're going to do a 3 minutes answer to it, opening question, and then I'll have a question for each one of them for about 5, 6 minutes, and then we'll try to have some questions and answers from you, and then food is outside waiting for you by the time we're all settled and done. So let me start it with Aylin, and then we'll go that way, and then we'll reverse the order. But how, this question is to all of you, right? How are your companies transforming the business models to more align value creation with sustainability and with the SDGs? Aylin.
Sure. Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. Sustainability lies at the very heart of insurance. We exist to make individuals, to make companies more sustainable and more long-term. And Allianz globally has been operating under the environment, government, and social governance principles for a very long time. And since the SDG principles of UNDP came into play, it has been supporting all 17 of them. But I want to focus a little bit on what we are doing in Allianz Turkey. And in Allianz Turkey, we have the insurance sector has been very much disrupted by all ecosystems, especially the startup ecosystem. And insurance, as we know it for a long time, is changing drastically. And basically, in 2016, we have created our sustainability strategy, which is very much in line with our core strategy and very much intertwined with our core strategy. And in this, basically, we have picked 5 SDG principles in UNDP that we will contribute to good health and well-being, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, sustainable cities and communities, and climate action. Now, when we are putting these into place, we are focusing on good environment, good individuals, good institutions, and good society. But the most important part of this is the two pillars that we are pushing, that is forcing us to continuously evolve our business model. And one part of it is innovation and entrepreneurship, to really work with inside entrepreneurs and outside entrepreneurs to really touch that startup ecosystem, and also developing preventative solutions, because preventative solutions is, especially on the health side, is really the way to ensure that the risks or the bad side of life is not happening to you, or at least you're prepared for it. And I think I can give you one example of this, which will make it a little bit more tangible. In 2017, aiming for good individuals, we have developed and implemented a health support program. And you know health insurance. Health insurance comes into play when something happens, the insurance company actually pays. It's not health insurance, it's unhealth insurance or sickness insurance. But what we are trying to do is to really be with our customers on their healthy times, to maintain their healthy times and to prolong their healthy times. I'll give you an example. We have started a diabetes support project, and basically it's a special kit containing medical measurement that's given to our diabetes, our customers that have diabetes. And we basically continuously provide medical support, allow them to measure their blood sugar. And basically it has been about 9 months since we have gotten into it, and we have already seen some improvement of 0.4 points of decrease in their blood sugar. So these focuses that are longer term really pay off. Same thing with breast cancer. We are now proactively reaching out to all of our female customers that are over 40 to really encourage them to go to do a mammogram to prevent breast cancer. And our usage has increased from 8% to 50%. So we can really have very tangible results. Similarly, a service of the doctors, which are available 24/7 to our customers. But what we are aiming for, and this is very much in line with our strategy, it's a win-win-win. As you say, in sustainable development, there's so much in it for us to ensure that we have a healthier society, we have healthier individuals. It's a complete win-win-win. And that's now what we have shifted our strategy to only focus on paying whenever a sickness happens, to how can we be with our customers throughout their lifespan to maintain their health. And that's a strategy that is very much in line with our SDG principles, supporting the good of the individual.
Thank you very much. Unilever, the poster child of sustainability multinational in the world.
We are so beautiful. No, so listen, it becomes more and more clear that there's only one way of doing business, and it must be in a responsible way, and to grow economically and in an environment in the right way. And as indeed Paul Polman once said, I think he said something along the way that there's only one way of doing business, and if we don't help decreasing poverty, if we don't help our consumers, if we don't help the wider environment, actually there's no reason for business. And when I was preparing for this session, I saw two horrible numbers which I never realized actually. So there's something like 9% of global GDP is actually being spent on preventing war. And 5% of global GDP is being spent on the climate change, which is a horrible thought. So there's actually only one way of doing business, and it should be in a responsible way. Now, Unilever started in 2010, indeed, when our new CEO came, and we created our USLP, Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And I must say the big change also for me working is that sustainability came really in the heart of our company. So we talk about doubling our business, reducing our environmental footprint, and increasing our social impact at the same time. And it is really in the heart of our business, which is really different for me to work with Unilever, because I see how different it is. And we try to really bring it in our brands. So on an average day in the world, 2.5 billion people in the world, in one way or the other, encounter with our products. So it's such an opportunity, but such a responsibility to do that in the right way. And there the SDGs are, of course, completely aligned. Let me give you, if I go from the globe to the global Unilever sustainability program, let me bring an example from Turkey. So what we try to do all over the world, but I bring it to Turkey, one of our brands that for sure you have in your house, and if you're not, then you have a dirty toilet probably, because it's Domestos, and Domestos is a toilet cleaner. And globally we set ourselves a target to really help clean toilet, clean sanitation, which is indeed linked to SDG 6. And how we do it actually, so in the heart of our brand of Domestos is about clean sanitation, is about clean toilets. So what we do, for example, in Turkey, we reach out to the schools, we give education to the kids, how to have a healthy house, how to have a healthy toilet. We help schools, we do promotions where schools getting clean toilets. So in Turkey we have reached about 13,000 schools in the meantime, which is about 3.7 million kids, and helping them on sanitation. So my summary of the whole thing would be, we are very clear that we have a role to play and that you can only do business in a responsible way. What changed my life also working in Unilever, that through the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, it became so much in the heart of our company that it's really in my daily way of doing business. And then, as with brands, we reach and touch the most people and having the biggest impact that we can give. Most of our brands actually have very clear sustainability goals. I'll talk a little bit later about a couple others. But example I gave, Domestos, where we really touch in the local community, in the local country, helping consumers to get a better and sustainable life.
Thank you. Selim, the HSBC, one of the largest financial institutions, a bank institution, how is the SDG changing their business models?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. As you know, global warming is one of the most important issues that we've been discussing for a long time. Scientists have agree that the temperature increase has to be limited at 2 degrees, and this is also part of the Paris Treaty as well, where we have 195 countries who have signed this treaty. And in case we cannot reach this target, it is obvious that there's going to be serious implications, on the economy through different sectors, including the energy sector, the tourism sector, and also agriculture sector. However, in order to achieve this target, it means that we have to change the way we are doing business, and we have to change some of the habits that we have adopted for the last 150 years. It means that there needs to be lower carbon emissions from the factories, from the power plants. It also means that the communities, the buildings, the cities have to become more efficient in terms of water and energy consumption as well. And I think we also have to minimize the amount of fossil fuel utilization to reach this target. Now, if you look at this, obviously it means that there needs to be more infrastructure investment, but the way we are going to invest in infrastructure is also going to change in the near future, because infrastructure investments should not only drive growth and improve the the capacity and modernize the infrastructure, but they also have to become more green and also lead to cleaner. We have to utilize more clean technology and also lead to lower carbon emissions. Now, this obviously comes with a price tag. Nothing is free. And as per our calculations, we believe that there needs to be around $100 trillion of investment and infrastructure by 2030 to reach this goal. And as per a research done by HSBC, it is shown that 68% of the companies right now put sustainability and clean technologies and green environment into their decision-making process, and they are accelerating their investments in cleaner technology and lower carbon emitting projects. Now, as a result of all this, I think the finance sector has also a significant role to play. And as HSBC, we are also supporting the SDG, and HSBC's SDG framework, I think, is an excellent example of our strategic commitment to sustainability, and also a great example to support our clients who are willing to invest in this area. And as HSBC, we have a commitment of providing $100 billion of financing and investment by 2025 into clean technology and lower carbon emissions. And there are some very good examples of some of the transactions that we've done. In the region, for example, back in December 2016, we were the arrangers of a green bond for the Polish government. And I think a more recent example that we have done in 2018 February is the green sukuk transaction that we've done for the government of Indonesia. This is an excellent example of combining the green bond investors together with the Islamic finance investors. We have other examples that we've done in Turkey as well, but if you allow me, maybe I'll talk about those in the second round. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Berna, visa. What does the SDG means to a company like Visa in that sense?
Thank you. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Yes, as you know, Visa is a global payment technology company. And when we look at, and we reach out to billions of people, hundreds of countries, and again, millions of merchants. So for us, when we look at SDGs, we know we have a great role that we can play in sustainable development globally. And when we look at it, one particular SDG comes to forefront, and that is SDG number 8, and that's about improving economic growth. Because we're at the crossroads of all commerce that's happening, across so many parties, we know we can really add to economic growth. In fact, there are studies that prove that the more as the transactions move from cash to electronic means, such as card, that they have a positive impact, positive correlation with economic growth. And why is that? Because if someone uses an electronic means to make a payment, then that cash stays in the banking system, and because of that, in turn, it becomes available for further investment and for further improvement of many things, including unemployment, addressing unemployment issues, addressing growth issues, and all of that. And when we look at the numbers, we see that as the personal consumption expenditure penetration increases by 10% from cash to electronic means, then we see at least 0.5% growth in GDP for that given economy. So if we do our core business right, as we do, 7/24, 5 nines availability and all of that globally, we know we can add to economic growth, and also by fighting shadow economy, which is also another value we add. So we see a lot of closeness with that particular SDG. Of course, we have many touch points across the different SDGs, but one other particular SDGs that's very close to our line of business is around reducing poverty. So from a reducing poverty perspective, we have a role, we do play an important role in terms of financial inclusion and making sure that we can address different businesses, but also consumers in making sure that they're part of the economy. And how do we do that? We do that through partnerships, we do that through innovation. And we do that from the many, many projects we implement across the world. So across the world, we have around 40 countries. We have reached almost 40 million people with our financial literacy projects. And that we do with partnerships, because we have our ecosystem involves the different banks, different stakeholders, and we have the ability to bring them together. And in that sense, the one project that we have in Turkey is important because it has been exported to many other countries from this geography, and that's called I Can Manage My Money. So this is about making sure that we can provide budget techniques and financial responsibility and rights knowledge to different disadvantaged communities across Turkey. And we have been doing that since 2009 with 22 banks and with public institutions, with private institutions together, and together with UNDP and Habitat for Turkey as well. So we think, SDG, sustainability is very, very important for our well-being, but so that's why, it's very much part of our DNA when we make our decisions and when we contribute to the economy through these different approaches we have.
Thank you very much. Let's try to go deeper a little bit. You started to talk about some of the brands and how does the Sustainable Development Goals are becoming a business opportunity for some of your brands. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
No, I will. So as a responsible business, it's for me so clear that to be a responsible business, we need the SDGs, and clearly I think the SDGs need businesses. And that was also interesting to hear this morning. There was so much talk about partnerships across governments, across NGOs, across businesses. So I'm very clear on that. So to reach the 2030 SDGs, we must play a big role. And then if I bring it to our USLP, our Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, we see the SDGs as a perfect external validation, actually. And the question I often get is, it's all nice, but does it work? Now, what we see, it does work, actually. So we see that, for example, we have 18 brands where purpose and sustainability is really in the heart of the brand. And those brands grow faster. So about 50% of our total growth globally comes from those brands. In Turkey, it's even 70%. And I'm not too surprised about that because, for example, if I talk to universities or we have students and then I tell all the beautiful stories about Unilever, about the business, and then when there are questions, they're always about sustainability. It's the only question I get about sustainability. And especially the younger generation, and I think it's the same across the world, are far more conscious about their environment, about what a company brings, about the brands. They ask questions that I could never have thought about when I was 21. So you really see that it's in the heart of our brands, and those brands that do it well, there it does work well. And we do see it brings more costs, less costs, more growth, but also more trust. As a company, I also feel we get more trust, especially from the younger generation, because sustainability is so much in the heart of our company. Now, if I can then bring it down to 2 examples, if you allow me, within Turkey. So one of our brands, Dove, which is shower gel for a big part. Actually, it's all about self-esteem for women. And we know across the world, and I saw it again this morning as well on the video, but also definitely in Turkey, self-esteem of younger women is a big issue. And I'll talk a little bit later about women empowerment, but the core of the brand of Dove is all about self-esteem. Of course, we sell good products as well, but what we communicate is a lot about that. So what we do is on a small scale, in our offices, we go to 50 different schools and we talk to all the girls there, we teach at the schools. Our newest campaign in Dove, you might have seen it on local Turkish television. I will not try to pronounce it in Turkish, but it's My Beauty is Bigger Than Numbers. It's very much about the inner beauty of women. So, and that really is in the heart of that brand as well, and we constantly communicate about that as well. And it does help business to drive. And it's very much on SDG 6, if I'm not mistaken, the Gender 5. Then another big thing as a total company, which is not so much in the brands, is empowering 1 million women. What we did, we created for Unilever Turkey with our local boards, which is mainly consist of Turkish people. Our 2022 strategy. And then in terms of sustainability, we want to have a big pillar on all our different brands. But the thing that came out specifically, especially for my Turkish colleagues, was about women empowerment and youth empowerment. So on women empowerment, we actually set together, we are now with about 20 companies, we call it Stronger Together. And with those companies, we want to really help and reach out to 1 million Turkish women to really empower them. And one is living by example, so we still have a way to go there as well. In our board, about 36–40%, well, 5 women are in our board. In our management, 49% is women, so we're really making progress there. In the wider community, for example, in factories, it's still a bit lower, and we need to get it up. And then with those 20 companies, we really agreed on women empowerment principles, and we all learn from each other, and we come together to really empower women, and as I said, live by example, but also really try to reach as many people in other companies as we can. Our goal is first with those 20 companies to really make an impact, but it's our suppliers, it's our customers, it's peers of ours, so we really want to have a big impact there. So in that sense, what is the big thing? If I can say one more thing, the big change, because I think your question is, does it help business, does it grow business? I remember in 27, it must have been, I was brand manager for a local brand in South Africa. It's called Rama, it's a margarine. And we did a whole, as you call it, CSR thing. And I thought it was quite cool. But then there was so much pressure on the business, and we just stopped it. It's the first thing that you stop if it's not in the heart of your business. For me now, that's unthinkable. With sustainability in the heart of our company, it will never happen like that. And I can now, leading the company, also see that. For example, on Domestos, on Dove, on Algida, on Alidor, the last thing we would cut would actually be our focus on sustainability, because it's part of our business and because we are convinced now that it's really growing our business. So in that sense, SDGs and growing business go completely hand in hand, and that's also why I was so happy to hear this morning that it's all about partnerships, because of course governments can't do it alone, of course NGOs can't do it alone, and of course businesses can't do it alone.
It's amazing to see the speed of growth of the brands that are driven by the sustainability comparing to other brands. Let me go back to Berna. You've mentioned about financial inclusion, you mentioned about the project you're doing in Turkey. The world has changed very fast. Digitalization, financial inclusion, perhaps moving even beyond card to cell phones and so on and so forth. So in that sense, what is Visa's vision, right, for the future of financial inclusion, digitalization, and how is that changing financial services sector business models towards sustainable development?
Sure. So if we look at some numbers, we see that 2 billion people across the world do not have access to financial services. And that's, really 45% of adults we're talking about. So they risk, transacting in their daily lives with costly, risky means of payment, if that. So this is part of the unbanked problem, but also the underserved problem. So there's also totally adults who do not have access to financial services, and similarly, there's the underserving problem as well. So that's one side. We also have about 200 million SMEs, small and middle-sized enterprises, that do not have access to accepting modern ways of payment. So digitalization provides a great opportunity for us to address this, right? So because in the past it was difficult, it was more difficult. But now, we can develop products and we can develop new approaches and new delivery methods to reach these adults who do not have access to banking, and also these businesses who do not have access to banking, at least proper banking, right? So if we were to give some examples, one thing, we have what we call MPOS, So these are little devices that turn machines into, that turn phones into little POS terminals. So that is growing very, very immensely across the world. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, using QR codes, again, as a means of accepting payments for these SMEs. So imagine you're a farmer selling apples on the roadside. All you need is just a QR code that whoever is passing by can read and make the payment right there with their phone. So that would enable the buyer and also the seller to actually transact and make that commerce happen. And so there's also the issuance piece. So from an issuance perspective, we used to depend on the actual card to be delivered to the consumer. We don't need to do that anymore. The card is just, it can be delivered virtually over the phone. So that interface in the phone allows us to do that. And we're seeing great examples of these kinds of models. For example, in India, because of the demonetization that they went through recently, in India we have seen amazing numbers that have come to life. So 35 million people have downloaded apps after the demonetization exercise. And they were able to reach, make payments using their mobile phones. And 600,000 merchants were enabled to accept payments, within a period of 6 months. So a lot can be done on digitalization. And, and digital finance is a big agenda item for our banks as well. So digital finance, according to some studies, is set to increase GDP by 6%, global GDP by 6% within a matter of 5 years. So these are really exciting tools we can use for financial inclusion and financial, and upgrading the services that populations have access to.
Thank you. This is very, very important because you have 4 very large corporations here. But the private sector is not monolithical. SMEs, especially in emerging economies in developing countries, are the backbones of the economy. 90% of all the jobs are in the hands of SMEs. So to provide the inclusion of providing services to SMEs, to including SMEs on the value chains of large corporations, are eventually going to become essential in that sense. Let me go to Selim Bey. In late last year, I think HSBC has become the first global bank in the world that issue a SDG bond. So you guys issue a $1 billion SDG bond. Can you talk a little bit about that bond? What was behind it? How did it do it? Was it oversubscribed? And then you've mentioned early on about your commitment to place $100 billion of sustainable finance by 2025. So how are you going to do that? Is that $100 billion of deals around the world right now? How are you going to go about it?
Thank you again. As you rightly pointed out, back in November 2017, as HSBC, we issued the first green bond, which was a $1 billion transaction. And I think HSBC was the first private sector entity who has issued, such a benchmark size bond, which shows our commitment, to provide financing to projects which are benefiting the communities and also the environment. This bond had a maturity of 2023, and it was oversubscribed. It was 3 times oversubscribed, which I think is also, a sign of the investment appetite for these type of transactions. And this bond is the financing which has been raised through the issuance of this bond is going to be utilized mainly for improving access to education, to essential healthcare, fresh water and sanitation. It will also be used increasing the share of renewable energy in the global energy generation mix, building sustainable cities and transport systems, and also helping communities to adopt the impacts of climate change. And we also have, I think very good examples of a couple of transactions that we've done in Turkey as HSBC. One of them is a senior unsecured bond transaction that we have arranged for the Turkish Industrial and Development Bank. And this was again a very successful transaction, significantly oversubscribed, around 10 times. And the size of the transaction was $300 million. And the other transaction that we've done is again for the Turkish Industrial and Development Bank, TSKB. And this was a Tier 2 bond transaction, Basel III compliant, which also has a capital treatment. And the proceeds of both of these transactions have been utilized to provide financing for similar transactions, for similar projects in Turkey on the sustainability side. However, we have, I think, another very good example of a similar transaction in Turkey, and that is the 270 million euros of green bond project bond that we have arranged for the financing of the PPP healthcare project, hospital project in Elazığ in Turkey. And this is also received significant amount of interest from the investors. And I think these type of transactions in Turkey are also important from different perspectives, because Turkey is a country with a great potential. A lot of infrastructure investments are still have been completed over the last decade, but still Turkey is in need of significant infrastructure projects. But if you look at the financing of all these projects that have been made up to date, they have been mainly financed through the bank market, the loan market. However, the loans in the total asset size of the Turkish banks have reached around 63%. This is the highest ratio globally, both in developed markets and also in developing markets. So therefore, I think Turkey is in need of tapping alternative sources of funding for a sustainable growth and for the completion of the large infrastructure projects that it needs to grow the economy. And I think from that perspective, it's also quite significant. Now, coming back to our commitment of providing $100 billion financing and investment by 2025, I think there are enough opportunities globally. As I mentioned, there are trillions of dollars of investment required by 2030 to reach the goal of limiting the temperature increase at 2 degrees. And this SDG framework that we have come up has also some eligible sectors, I think very similar to what Aylin has mentioned. And the eligible sectors here are good health and well-being, where the financing of hospitals and healthcare centers and training for medical professionals and vaccines come into play. The other one is obviously access to quality education. Again, financing will be provided for the construction of schools and so on. Clean water and sanitation is going to be the other area which is going to be eligible for the financing of these transactions. And then, financing will be provided for water supply and distribution, water treatment facilities, water saving systems, technologies, and so on. Affordable and clean energy, again, financing for renewable energy, especially, solar and wind, is going to be the mainly eligible ones, but also, smart grids and, smart meters will also be eligible under this category. And then, sustainable cities and commitments, communities where the, financing of rail transportation projects for public transportation is going to come into play. Obviously, HSBC's activities in sustainable financing are not only limited to bond transactions, but we also provide financing from our balance sheet in the form of loans. And we are quite sensitive and take into account the sustainability element of the projects. Just to give you an example, when we are providing financing to a wind power project, we look whether the location of the turbines are on the way of the birds' immigration routes, so that we don't disrupt the immigration of the birds and create issues. So it's on the top of our agenda and will continue to be so, I think, going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aylin, I loved your metaphor earlier on about unhealth insurance rather than health insurance. Now, as you mentioned, the insurance industry, a lot of disruptions going on. There was actually an interesting report that came out yesterday from PwC that despite that, there's an optimism in the CEOs of the insurance industry. So if we take this analogy of the unhealth insurance to health insurance that you mentioned, what are the other products that you think can be or are under development by Allianz or the industry as a whole for the SMEs, for the base of the pyramid? How can we reach, just like the unbankable, the uninsured, right? Especially if you consider that climate change is going to cause more and more risk, more and more trouble. So how can we provide, who doesn't have today, what we as middle class all have, which is insurance, which is the greatest perhaps tool of resilience. So how, and has the SDG started to permeate through the industry, in your company as an opportunity to change and to create new products in that sense?
Indeed, it has. Globally, actually, climate change and many other disruptions are impacting the way Allianz is approaching new products. And this is from microinsurance to renewable energy focus, to disaster protection, to increased focus on the SMEs. Now, and there are more than 150 products that Allianz has produced globally that are serving these purposes. When you come to Turkey, it's a bit more challenging, I have to say, because insurance is still viewed as a luxury, unnecessary, because there's Allah up there and is protecting. And this is a mindset change. And we are in it for the long term. And basically, that means we are, for example, our mission is to really change these perceptions and increase the penetration of insurance so that not just the privileged, but the mass communities, especially SMEs and poorer communities, can benefit from insurance. I mean, I'll give you one example as an investment we are doing. We're building Allianz Technology Center. It will be in Beykoz. And in this center, we are aiming to, it will be the first accredited disaster earthquake simulation and a fire simulation center. And our aim is to really educate our clients, especially SME clients, COBIs as we call them in Turkish, to understand how best to protect their businesses, what are the materials to protect it from fire, because you cannot imagine how many fires can be prevented if there was a little bit more education and building. So it's not just about providing the product, but it's also a lot about really educating and increasing the awareness. I mean, and climate change continues to be a big challenge, and we are also supporting it with specific products. For example, when we came up with our sustainable strategy, I said to my team, 3 sustainable products or solutions every year, and that's what we are basically committing to. And last year, one solution was what I suggested, what I explained on the breast cancer, but the 2 others were actually to decrease the gas emissions. We have come up with a motor insurance for 100% electric cars in the means of significant discount, up to 20% discount to those car owners who are having MOD insurance and who are having 100% electric cars. The other is really supporting the renewable energy, especially solar and wind, hydroelectric energy. And we have asked the risk teams to devise a product that is providing 10-year performance guarantee to the new solar systems. Yes, so not solar system, but to the solar providers, solar energy providers. So these are the two products. We are currently working more on microinsurance to penetrate into this. And another product that the sector has come up with is the complementary insurance. As you know, private health insurance is still for relatively high socioeconomic class in Turkey. It hasn't really penetrated. As a matter of fact, Turkey has a pretty good state health system. But what we are seeing is increased need for complementary health insurance that is really designed for more the masses, and also for smaller corporations like SMEs that are trying to increase their attractiveness as an employer, as well as providing to their employees. So the sector is really evolving in a way, is aiming to evolve in a way that it can actually reach not just the corporations and high-income individuals, but really penetrate much deeper. And Turkey, with its young population, has a very long way to go. I mean, our penetration levels are extremely low. And since insurance is there to actually prevent from risks and to maintain a certain life standard, it can really be extremely helpful in times of big crisis. It actually, as we are able to penetrate into the citizens more and more, I think we'll be able to give significantly more benefits and increase the economic level.
Thank you very much. Maria, do we have questions or we have...
Yes, we do have questions. We have questions from Twitter, and our question that has come in is the following. Fortune 500 companies certainly have the power of scale. However, in Turkey, SMEs provide 78% of employment and 55% of GDP. The question is, how do we meaningfully and effectively include global SMEs in the SDG public-private partnership conversation?
I think we touched a little bit of that in the last round. From my point of view, personally, and then perhaps they can comment, the utilization of value chain approach, not necessarily the formalization of value chain, but the thinking of across value chain is one of the methodologies we use at UNDP to really find how to bring SMEs into the mainstream market economy, out of informality into formality in that sense. So the use of analytical aspects of value chain is an important element. I don't know if anybody want to take that one, and I don't know if we have more or...
We have one more. We have one more. And that question is, in order to achieve, this is more for government, but this is one that we could put to you all, in order to achieve the global goals of sustainability, how do we stimulate the private sector cooperation between different countries directly without the participation of states, given that the public sector is not always equally ready for change?
I don't know if I understood that question correctly, but what I'm hearing is, let's check the question. So what I'm hearing is since these global companies have access to different means of, interacting among their different territories, do they have an opportunity to cross-fertilize better and easier than governments, perhaps? Shall I take the question as such?
Correct.
Okay. So I think yes, because yes, we do have a lot of opportunities to exchange ideas, to exchange know-how, and certainly in my line of business, and certainly in Visa specifically, we do that a lot. And as we have projects that are successful, we export them. We export the models. For example, the project that was started here, I Can Manage My Money. We had all of the banks, public institutions and private institutions together, and we exported that model almost exactly as is into, I think, at least 10 more countries within Europe. So yes, I think private sector has good opportunity to cross-fertilize among countries.
Can I say something on the first yes, question? Please. So I indeed think that a big global company as ours, we do have a role with local smaller companies as well. So for example, what we are doing, we're looking at local suppliers, which actually is good for us, but it's also good for them. It's more stable supply, and it makes us less dependent on Forex, for example. So we do a lot there. And also from our customers' point of view. So of course we want to sell and grow with Beam and with A101 and with Shock, but we also really supporting the small and local supermarkets and help them to train how to run their business, have specific products, specific supply to them. So both on the supply and the customer side, we really try consciously to help and support local companies. One, because we think it's our responsibility, but also, and that's why it all comes together again, it's good for them and it's good for us.
Okay, and before we open it up to the audience, another one from Twitter, and thank you for everyone that's tweeting in. What support from the public sector and international organizations like UNDP does the private sector need, that you guys need, in order to expand your action on SDGs? Very briefly.
Can I ask, insurance, would any regulatory change make it easier for you to penetrate on the insurance market to SMEs and to rural communities?
I mean, as insurance sector, we are very regulated, and actually we are working very much together with the government on a lot of the different issues. And for SMEs, I think it's not necessarily a regulatory change is what we need, but we need a lot more support in increasing the awareness of insurance, and to really work with the government to help convincing the SMEs that they need the insurance, they would want to use the insurance, and that's actually a win-win. And for this, I think our efforts are broad, but with the support of the government in this, it would be significantly higher. But I mean, there are other areas we are working very closely with government, especially on the traffic insurance. As you know, it's a big, I think, a bleeding problem for Turkey, and basically the government is really supporting us to ensure that we can educate the drivers and really reach the community, especially with less education, to really help them educate. So there are many avenues where we can reach both SMEs but also the mass and poorer communities with the help of government.
Okay, I hear stomachs rumbling, so we're going to have to leave it there. Your questions, if you can do them in the lunch break. And yes, lunch is served now in the foyer. But first of all, please join me in thanking our panel here. Excellent lineup and session. See you back here at 2:10. Afiyet olsun, everybody. See you later. Excellent panel.